2 and 2, 1. This is as close as we can get to the base of the World Trade Center. You can see the firemen assembled here, the police officers, FBI agents, and you can see the two towers. A huge explosion now raining debris on all of us. We better get...
What motivated me to look into 9/11 is I had a student, and he came up to me real excited, and he said, I saw this amazing film, and it tells the truth of what happened on 9/11. I said, what was the name of it? He goes, Loose Change, you have to see it.
You sort of wonder when something like that happens, well, who stands to benefit? You know, who had the opportunity and motive?
Galileo's law of falling bodies calculates the time in which an object will travel a certain distance in complete freefall.
Wait a minute, what was that? It's almost like Muhammad Ali. He would win by constant jabbing. Jab, 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 until the person was down. I then researched their claims and found out, of course, almost everything they said could be debunked very easily.
This war was sold to the American people based on falsehoods and lies.
The sales campaign that took place, I would characterize as aggressive deception.
Well, I wouldn't rule out a manipulation.
This was fraud, and I can't say that often enough. No mistake, fraud.
George Bush changes enemies. Osama bin Laden is replaced by Saddam Hussein. Everything begins less than 6 hours after the attack. At the Pentagon, which was also struck, Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld scans the rubble and issues his instructions. Stephen Cambone, one of his advisors, takes notes. Rumsfeld's intentions are unequivocal. Pearl. On the afternoon of 9/11, the Pentagon advisor places a call to the president's speechwriter.
I was on the telephone with David Frum, and I said to David on the afternoon of 9/11, whatever else the president says, he should say that we will hold responsible the states that support terrorism.
It is a strategic break from the more modest policies of Bush's predecessors. An ambitious program for all-out war, the stated goal of a group to which Richard Pearl belongs, the neoconservatives. Dick Cheney, Donald Rumsfeld, Condoleezza Rice, Paul Wolfowitz, Douglas Feith, Joe Wilson, a career diplomat, witnessed their rise.
They came into office with the Republican Party, and in particular with the staffing done by the Vice President in his office and the Secretary of Defense in his office.
The neoconservatives, they have ties to the world of oil, to the defense industry. They are ideologues.
On the evening of 9/11, the president's saying, well, maybe we'll be going after Iraq now. And somebody said, well, that would be against international law. The president responded, I don't care, we're going to kick some ass.
2 days after the World Trade Center and the Pentagon were attacked, the president was at Camp David with his senior officials, and Mr. Wolfowitz was telling the president, the Iraq and Saddam Hussein is the real problem.
Took the neoconservatives only 48 hours to prevail, change the regime in Baghdad, subjugate Iraq, a simpler objective than that of destroying the nebulous terrorist.
But I wanted to find out why it was convincing and why people still believe in these theories. I eventually worked with my friend and cohort, Raju Parakal.
I was not even in the United States. I actually was in my hometown in India, and we were watching it happening actually live on CNN International.
You see the plane coming in from what looks like the east side.
There were many thoughts running through my mind. One was, this isn't true, because this is happening in the world's strongest, most militarized country.
When you hear about different people making their claims about 9/11, you hear that say, jet fuel doesn't melt steel beams. And I'm sure you've seen the clips on YouTube where different guys are like, yes, it does. And I don't know if you've seen people reacting to what many say, jet fuel, 1,500 degrees Fahrenheit, steel melts at 2,500. But then they show that steel does lose strength at around 600, is what they say.
Yeah.
What's your argument to that?
Let's get into this, because the official narrative says, in both the Twin Towers and Building 7, that the steel, in the case of Building 7, expanded, in the case of the Twin Towers, weakened. But what we have in both cases is the evidence of molten iron. And that is incredible. It is found by the U.S. Geological Survey in all of their dust samples, previously molten iron microspheres, about the diameter of a human hair. 4 tons of them by extrapolation. This is incredible. Iron doesn't melt until 2,800 degrees. So yes, steel weakens earlier, but NIST denies the evidence of extreme temperatures, which are available where? Published in a metallurgical examination in the Appendix C by FEMA in 2002, before NIST took over the investigation and threw out that metallurgical examination. Why? Well, what did it say? It said that there's a hot temperature corrosion attack on the steel. Liquid molten iron invading the grain boundaries of the steel. Well, wait, what's liquid molten iron? We haven't used iron in our skyscrapers for 100 years. Where does it come from? Well, molten iron is the byproduct of thermite. Thermite is an incendiary used by the military to cut through steel like a hot knife through butter.
Holy shit.
The findings that we came up with is the effect of fear.
This movie zeroes in on the multi-billion-dollar human trafficking industry and honors a hero, someone who saved children from sex slavery. But to the media, this person isn't a hero. Someone who rescues kids from pedophiles is a villain.
These films are created out of moral panics. They're created out of bogus statistics. They're created out of fear. And with something like Sound of Freedom, it specifically is looking at QAnon concepts of these child trafficking rings that are run by the high-level elites.
I would have done a legitimate investigation to find out what exactly happened on 9/11. How did they know who did this so quickly like they did Lee Harvey Oswald?
Just a few months after being sworn in as president, John F. Kennedy said the following in a speech given before the American Newspaper Publishers Association.
The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings.
On November 22nd, 1963, President Kennedy was assassinated in Dallas. There are hours of damning evidence clearly showing that the CIA, organized crime, and the highest levels of the U.S. federal government were all involved, including the magic bullet, the grassy knoll, and the presence of young CIA asset George H.W. Bush in Dallas that day, a day that he claims he could not remember. But the entire operation was blamed on a single lone gunman.
I don't think that Oswald shot any of the bullets.
All conspiracy theories are rewrites. You're recreating reality to support something you believe in.
They just lost trust in pretty much everything, including the presidency, the government, and the military. So many ways, 9/11 conspiracy theories were sort of like a signal for what was going to come later on.
What has happened now is, instead of being divided as to Democrat, Republican, what we've gone into is being divided as science believers and science deniers.
Gain-of-function research, as you know, is juicing up naturally occurring animal viruses to infect humans. To arrive at the truth, the U.S. government should admit that the Wuhan Virology Institute was experimenting to enhance the coronavirus's ability to infect humans. Scientists in the U.S. have long known how to mutate animal viruses to infect humans. For years, Dr. Ralph Barrick, a virologist in the U.S., has been collaborating with Dr. Shi Zhengli of the Wuhan Virology Institute, sharing his discoveries about how to create superviruses. This gain-of-function research has been funded by the NIH. The collaboration between the U.S. and the Wuhan Virology Institute continues. Doctors Barrick and Shi worked together to insert bat virus spike protein into the backbone of the deadly SARS virus, and then used this man-made supervirus to infect human airway cells. Think about that for a moment. The SARS virus had a 15% mortality. We're fighting a pandemic that has about a 1% mortality. Can you imagine if a SARS virus that's been juiced up and had viral proteins added to it, to the spike protein, if that were released accidentally?
Do not fund.
Do you fund Dr. Barrick's gain-of-function research?
Dr. Barrett does not doing gain-of-function research, and if it is, it's according to the guidelines, and it is being conducted in North Carolina.
Matter of life and death. Now we're having arguments on reality and what is real and what is not.
For these crimes, Chansley was sentenced to nearly 4 years in prison, far more time than many violent criminals now receive. What did Jacob Chansley do to receive this punishment? To this day, there is dispute over how Chansley got into the Capitol building. But according to our review of the internal surveillance video, it is very clear what happened once he got inside. Virtually every moment of his time inside the Capitol was caught on tape. The tapes show that Capitol Police never stopped Jacob Chansley. They helped him. They acted as his tour guides. Here's video of Chansley in the Senate chamber. Capitol Police officers take him to multiple entrances and even try to open locked doors for him. We counted at least 9 officers who were within touching distance of unarmed Jacob Chansley. Not one of them even tried to slow him down.
We are grappling with the big lie.
Tens of millions of Americans suspect this election was stolen from them.
It really was rigged against Donald Trump.
We have not seen fraud on a scale that could have affected a different outcome in the election.
I know for a fact there was illegal activity going on there. People have pictures of people carrying ballots out of that place. There is pictures of vans full of ballots coming out of that place. These Democrats took every avenue possible to commit fraud in this election. The poll book is completely off. Completely off.
Off by 30,000?
I'd say that poll book is off by over 100,000. That poll book. Why don't you look at the registered voters on there? How many registered voters are on there? Do you even know the answer to that?
No, I guess I'm trying to get to the bottom of this here.
Zero. There's 0.
So, my question then is if the...
Guess how many, wait, what about the turnout rate? 120%?
Why? We're not seeing the poll book off by 30,000 votes. That's not the case.
What did you guys do? Take it and do something crazy to it?
That's the best I can tell you. I fear a lot.
On yesterday's update, we discussed how the Maui police chief, John Pelletier, is also the coroner, but we were left with so many questions. For one, how does Pelletier, who worked in the Las Vegas desert, suddenly then transfer to the small island of Maui and become the first non-native chief so easily? The only connection I see between Vegas and Maui is that they refer to Vegas as the 9th island. How does a close-knit community like Maui look at this guy's resume, see he was deeply connected and in charge of the deadliest shooting in U.S. history, and say, hey, you're hired, and while you're at it, here's a 30% boost in your income? Who else came over to the island of Maui that has a dark history like this guy? What other officials are behind the scenes and are connected to this massacre? Pelletier is poisonous, and what he's saying simply does not make sense.
When we find these, our family and our friends.
From David Crawford, and we're here reporting on what I believe is potentially a smoking gun of sorts. We just don't know what it is, but I'm going to show you the scenario of this car and what's surrounding it and how temperatures could reach this level.
The remains we're finding is through a fire that melted metal.
I'm sure plenty of you have seen these videos that have been coming out of Maui of vehicles literally melting onto the street. The aluminum is literally melting out of the vehicles, and the melting point for aluminum is 1220 degrees Fahrenheit. That's just crazy because, as you can see in this next video, none of the asphalt has melted.